Welcome back to Monday Mod Tips. I am Captain Xavier, and today I'm going to be hazarding the troubled and contentious waters of lithium-ion batteries, namely ICRs, IMRs, and IFRs, respectively. And I'm going to try to clear up some of the confusion as to why you shouldn't use some and why some are okay, and why there is so much anger and towards them in the Nerf community. Some of these, if you so much as mention Trustfires in certain Nerf groups, you'll get run out on a rail, and people tend to get very bent out of shape about them. And I'm going to try to explain why that is. And it is primarily a safety concern. They're trying to get rid of misinformation and bad information and poor practices and unsafe practices in our hobby because they genuinely care about the people in the community. And so they try to explain why you shouldn't use them, and then people don't want to listen, and then they get very angry. And the internet is a horrific place to have any kind of meaningful discussion, of course. So I'm going to try to cover the science behind it, why they are unsafe and why they really shouldn't be used. Starting with the Trustfires and the Ultrafires. They are the ones that a lot of first-time modders and early modders find themselves using. I used them when I first got into it because that's what I was told to do, because that's what was the thing back then. We have since learned that there are much better and safer options, and they really should be getting phased out of our community entirely. The reason they aren't is, as I said, they're incredibly cheap and incredibly easy to get a hold of, and they appear to work, but they don't really. These Trustfires that I have are a 3.6 volt, these are a 3.7 volt, and so it's very tempting if all you understand is voltage, if you really don't understand the concept of current, to think that you could just put these in a stock blaster and they will work. And they do appear to. If you put two of these and two dummies in a strife, it will rev faster than it used to. But it will drain really fast, and it won't really spin up all that well, and there are other various issues, and that is all the result of the current rate, the discharge rate that these have, which is relatively low comparatively, compared to, say, a LiPo or something. They are capable of a high discharge, and which is why the motors appear to spin, as they should. And they do have the high voltage, but they were never designed for sustained high current use. They were intended for short bursts of high current, high voltage use. They were originally designed for use in vape pens, which is a short burst of a high current and a high voltage to vaporize the material. You don't hold it down for long periods of time like you do with a Nerf blaster with flywheels. And so the chemistry in these ones particularly, in ICRs, is not stable enough to sustain that rate of current. When you draw that much through it at once, and you have that much of the chemical reaction on the inside, which is lithium ions going from one side of the battery to the other, if you do it for too long, for too much, they will heat up, and worst case scenario, they can in fact catastrophically fail and destroy your blaster and possibly hurt you. Not terribly likely, and I haven't heard too many cases of that happening, but more likely is that the high current draw is going to heat the batteries up enough to actually damage them, and then they won't recharge properly. And if you drain them too far because you try to run them for too long, you can damage the battery and they won't recharge properly. And that is where they become dangerous, where somebody puts them on a charger overnight, and because they are damaged, they end up overheating and they end up starting a fire. And that is the real concern that people have. That is what they're trying to get people away from, is the risk of damaging the batteries, the batteries becoming damaged, and then starting a fire on the charger because you didn't use them properly. You're really not likely to seriously have one, burn up or explode in a Nerf blaster, though that is technically possible. And so that is why people very much are trying to drive these out of our community, because they were never intended for that application, for long, sustained draw. And so you just shouldn't use them. Yeah, they're cheap and they fit nicely, but they're unstable, and even the vape community doesn't recommend them anymore. A lot of the forums that I read on them, they were saying now they're chemically unstable and they run the risk of having problems when you go to recharge them. There is also a high issue with counterfeit, with cheap knockoff companies making really cheap ones that appear to work because they've got the voltage, but the chemistry inside is even worse done. They've used, cheap chemicals and cheap processes, and so they have almost no capacity. They drain almost immediately, and then they become damaged, and then they start fires. So I have now joined the group that says avoid these like the plague. Just don't do them. Go to IMRs if you absolutely need a 3.7 volt AA size battery. IMRs are much more stable. They are a lithium manganese chemistry. These ones are lithium cobalt chemistry. And they are far safer. They're less likely to have a catastrophic failure. You do still run the risk of, if you drain them too far or if you push them too hard, you can damage the battery and they won't recharge properly, but they're less likely to have a catastrophic failure on a charger because the chemistry is more stable. They are also, if you buy them from companies like eFest, they will in fact have a anti-counterfeit guarantee, so you can make sure that you're actually getting a reputable battery, as opposed to the $1 Trustfires you're seeing on eBay, which are almost certainly not actually good quality. So IMRs are a much better option if you're going for that. The IFRs are a lower voltage and a far, far more stable chemistry because they are a lithium iron battery, and iron is inherently stable compared to manganese or cobalt. And so they do have a lower voltage. These ones only come in at 3.2, but they are capable of a much more safe discharge. You can actually draw from these a lot more than you can with the other ones without having any risk to the battery becoming damaged. They're still not the best option for high-speed motors, but 4 of these with the worker motors or the select fire kit, that's what they actually engineered those around, and that's why they sell these with them. And they work very, very well. They're still not going to have the capacity of a LiPo, but the nice thing about those motors is they spin up so fast, and if you're using 3-round bursts, you're not holding the rev down. So you're not draining them as fast, and you're not taxing them as much if you use them in the way that they were intended. These ones are stable enough you can actually buy them in stores like Walmart, and even Out of Darts will carry them, and he is very picky about what he will carry, and so he has tested these and put them through the ringer and done the math and the research, and is willing to actually sell them through his shop because he knows that they are safe. So if you absolutely want to run AA size batteries so you don't have to get expanded battery trays or rewire everything to make them work, look for the LiFE batteries, the IFRs, over even IMRs, and definitely just don't use ICRs at all. Because this Nerf is simply not the application they were designed for, and if you use anything in a manner it wasn't intended to, you run the risk of it having some sort of a catastrophic failure. And we want to avoid those as much as possible. So that is why so many people are super anti-Trustfire. They're afraid that you're going to have a catastrophic failure and hurt yourself or your property. And so they don't want, especially with new modders who aren't used to how to properly care for high voltage, high powerful, rechargeable batteries. They do have to be cared for properly, and I will be going into an entire separate video on how to properly care for rechargeable batteries, how to recharge them, how to store them, that sort of thing, in future videos. But this was kind of the basics on why there is so much anger around Trustfires, and it is because they are perceived as being unsafe, and therefore unsafe for the community. And so when people tell new modders, oh yeah, they're fine, you risk them getting hurt, because yeah, you could probably use them in a stock blaster for years without a problem. I did. I used them in my strifes for HVZ for many, many years. I used 2 Trustfires and 2 dummies, and I never had a problem, because I did actually do the research on how to properly, to care for them, always stay by them when they're charging, because I did have ones where I damaged the batteries. I drew them too far, something went wrong, and as soon as I put them on the charger, they immediately started overheating, and you could hear them hissing, and yeah, that battery is bad. And that was the point where I started to switch to IMRs, because I started having that happen more often. I never started a fire because I cared for them properly. But for, if you're telling young kids, yeah, just get a couple of Trustfires and throw them in there, they might not know to not leave them on the charger overnight, and they may end up having a serious problem. And so it's better to just never use them at all. And you definitely don't want to try to use them with high-powered motors, which have a far higher current draw, because then you do run the risk of them overheating so badly that they will actually rupture and cause serious problems. And so if you never got into the habit of using them in your stock blasters, you're never going to run the risk of trying to run them in an upgraded blaster because you don't have LiPo yet. Just don't get into the habit of using them at all. You really shouldn't even try using IMRs on high current draw motors, because they're not designed for it, and they won't do it as well. That is why people recommend moving to LiPo. LiPo batteries were specifically engineered for high power motor, for high current motors, and so they are capable of safely producing the current that is necessary, and have the capacity to do so. So if you are going to try to get into high-powered modding, you really need to do it properly, and you can do it in stages. You don't have to make the plunge right away, but you definitely need to start looking into the best practices that people recommend. Yeah, they're more expensive, but they're safer, and LiPo batteries will last for many, many, many charges, and so you end up saving the money over time anyway. So there is my take on this. The reason you shouldn't use these, especially not Trustfires, is because they weren't designed for it. They're not going to give you the performance you really want, because they can't produce the current to get the motors to spin up fast enough and to continue to spin up between charges or between darts. And there's a lot of risk involved. If you use them absolutely correctly and you are very careful, yes, you can use them safely, but if you make the one mistake, bad things can happen. And kids who don't know any better should not be encouraged to be using them. So I will not recommend Ultrafires or Trustfires, and I will not use them in anything anymore. I do still use IMRs in a couple of applications, and I do enjoy using these with the Select Fire kits. But all of my high power mods, I now use LiPo, and so that is what we're going to go into next. The next video will cover LiPo, at least the very basics on how to pair your LiPo with your motor. I will also have a video on caring for rechargeable batteries, probably after that, so that you can get an idea of how to properly charge them, how to store them, how to discharge them, things like that. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and put them in the comment section below. If you think I've gotten anything completely wrong, let me know. I have no interest in seeing comments like, I've run Trustfires in my Rapid Strike for years and it works great and I've never had a problem. Yes, I know that they can be used, but you shouldn't. There are better options, there are safer options, and as a community, we should be encouraging safer practices, not just the easy practices. So, if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, requests for future episodes, go ahead and put them in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching.